I've got some fish here that I'm looking at. They look very, very good. There's some really nice varieties of fish in here. And we do just have to be aware that some of these fish are quite large growing. So at some point, we're definitely going to need to consider a bigger fish tank. And what I'm really going to recommend is that every now and then bring a sample of water down to the shop, and we can put it through our spin test machine and just make sure that everything's going on good with the water. Because over time, especially with this amount of fish, as the fish grow, then we have to lose some fish, because every tank's only got a limited biological capacity. Now, so a bigger tank is going to be on the cards if we want to keep all these fish, due to the size that a lot of these fish grow to. Now, if you want to buy time, what you can do is get some marine pure balls, and they're little balls that act like a compost heap, and you can hide them in the aquarium. You do not need to see them. You don't need to make a feature of them, but they're going to increase the biological capacity of the water and increase what's called denitrification. So therefore, you'll find that the tank just in general will have a higher capacity. And fish keeping is 50% water quality, which we can manage as long as you bring us a sample of water in a video every now and then. And in the video, we really want to see what the fish are doing, and we want to see any bits and pieces you've got. So when you make us the video, show us how the filters run, show us what the fish are doing, and also show us your fish food, your water ager, and all your bits and pieces. Keep all your fish stuff in like a basket or something, so you can just show us all the stuff in there. And I really recommend having all your fish stuff in one spot, because so often I come to someone's house and their fish food's over here and the water ager's over there, and I really think chucking it all in a basket's a really good idea. And as far as fish food is concerned, the first food I'd want to get into these fish is what's called Denichi color, because some of these fish are on the verge of coloring up. And fish like the Salvini, that's going to become a very beautiful, very colorful fish. And then you've also got like a Rivulatus or some sort of fella in there. They're going to color up really, really nicely. Oh, I got a parrot. Oh no, I can't really see it properly. It's just, anyway, that's cool. But so Denichi color. And then I also, next time I'm looking for food, I'd also think about Spectrum's probiotics. Now, the reason why I'd go for Spectrum's probiotics is it's cold extruded food. With the foods that I recommend too, they're actually aquatic ingredients. They're things that the fish would actually eat in the wild. Whereas a lot of fish food is just terrestrial plant matter and terrestrial proteins, which actually the fish don't even eat in the wild. So it's really important when you feed your fish, you want to feed them stuff that they'd actually eat in the wild. And the Spectrum's probiotics also has a probiotic bacteria in the food, which means when the fish poo, the bacteria in the poo physically eats the poo. So it really keeps the tank a lot cleaner. And then the other food that I'd consider is when you want another algae wafer, I would go with the Spectrum algae wafer. Now, the reason why I'd go with the Spectrum algae wafer is it's actually water stable, which means it takes 24 hours before it starts to break down. Whereas all your other wafers, you put them in there and they do start polluting. So fish keeping is 50% fish food. So the food you choose is half of fish keeping, and I will find that I'll go from job to job. And quite often, I'll go to someone's house and all the fish look fabulous. And then I test the water and the water's terrible. The fish should be dead. And I look at the food and they've got good food. Then I'll often go to the very next house and all the fish are dying, and I'll test the water and it's much better than the last house. So food is a really important thing. And now, so we've got 2 filters in here, which is great, but also making sure that we're moving the filters to the very top, because what we want is very good surface agitation across the top. But we've got some great fish here, but they're going to need some more room. You could do too to buy yourself some time, particularly because this tank is going to need these fish are going to need a much bigger fish tank, is to add some polyfilter. Now, what I do with polyfilter, if I've got one of these Aquael filters, is I'll stick that to the wall and I'll just slide into this gap at the back here. It sort of snugs in the back there, a piece of polyfilter. And the reason why I want the polyfilter is polyfilter will remove anything impure from the water without removing anything you want from the water. And then over time, the polyfilter becomes black, and that means you need to replace it. So it's really important that that all your pheromones, phenols, and all of the stuff released by the fish is removed. So very regular water changes is definitely going to help that. But in saying that, adding the polyfilter is just going to remove all the accumulants and all the things you don't want from the water. And particularly if your fish are getting too big for your tank, that becomes very, very important. Because if you've got fish that are growing too big for the tank, the problem is the fish start stunting, because the pheromones and phenols and things will actually stunt the growth of the fish, which is obviously not ideal. So adding polyfilter to this aquarium would be something I'd also consider. Now, one of the advantages of using white buckets and white boxes and so forth is it does allow you to see your water clarity. So the clearer your water the more on top of your water changes you are. But if you start putting your water into white bucket and you see the water's like brownie color or a little bit tea color or whatever, that means you maybe, depending on what's going on with your tank, might mean that maybe some more regular water changes would be in order. Just bear in mind that a lot of catfish have got poisonous spines. So if you ever get stung by one, which means if you handle it and it stung you, what you want to do is go and put your hand under some hot water, because the hot water will break down the neurotoxin. So it'll be not too fun. You'll be fine. But getting stung by a catfish is not a fun thing, I know, because I've been stung before. And you just go and get some hot water and you put your hand under the hot water or whatever you've decided to get stung. And then with the hot water, once it's hot enough for you to not really be able to handle the hot, all you're worried about now is the hot, you're not worried about the sting, then the hot water will break down the neurotoxin and then you'll be okay and you won't die. Yeah. Hopefully not. I'm moving fish. Something else I'll often do is whenever I take my ornaments out of the tank, put a bit of water in the bottom of the container with the ornaments, because it's amazing, especially with someone that loves their catfish. And some catfish can be ridiculously expensive too. Is that sometimes there's a fish that gets stuck in the ornament and you can't see it at all, and the fact that there's a bit of water in the bottom means if it does fall out, it should survive. So when you're doing a water change, you've really got to make sure you use a gravel cleaner, because this tank was pretty clean and then suddenly I've penetrated the gravel and it's really dirty. So that's sort of not ideal. So when we're moving fish, we want to try and keep similar sized fish in the different containers we use, and we want to try to have as little fish as possible per container, and we want to try to have as little water as possible. Just don't put a lot of water in there. What we'd rather have is just enough water, so when the fish swim, they're going to agitate the surface, and that's going to help keep the oxygen and redox potential up. So don't put too many, and put similar size together, and just keep an eye on them, because we don't want little fish in with big fish, or spined fish in with non-spined fish, or too many fish, or too much water. Otherwise you get in trouble. Aquarium, it's really important that we have some rubber or some foam underneath the aquarium. Otherwise what happens is that you get a new aquarium when it's brand new, and you put it in position and it's in a certain angle. You do your best to level it, whatever, but it's going to be in a certain angle. But then the problem is that if you just leave it in one spot, typically it's okay. But then if you move it to another spot, then as the silicone gets a little bit more brittle and a little bit older and a little bit less flexible, if you go and put that somewhere else, and it's not in exactly the same angle, which of course it's not going to be, then the silicone actually has got less ability to give. And when it comes to silicone, this way, it's very, very strong. But this way, it's not very strong. For example, I can have a glass lid, silicone to the top of a tank, and then if I tried to pull it that way, there's no strength in the world that would pull it off. But if I pull it this way, it's actually not even that hard. So what you got to be aware of is that your tank's got to be flat. And if it's not flat, if there's angle in it, it can easily leak, because if there's pressure going this way, the silicone is not strong. Pressure going that way, the silicone is very strong. So what I'm going to recommend that we put a rubber mat down before we put the tank back. Otherwise, if there's no give in the mat, then the chance of the tank leaking becomes significant. Now, because this gravel's so bad, I've found some RO water in the car. So I'm going to use the RO water to give this gravel a bit of a clean. But if it's an established tank, what we never want to do is use tap water to clean the gravel. And we never want to use tap water to clean our filters, because tap water can contain chlorine, and chlorine can kill the good bacteria that could be keeping your fish alive. So this gravel is very dirty. So I'm going to give it a wash with 20 litres of RO water, just to try and get a better start. So we don't start with dirty gravel. If you are going to put your aquarium on foreign pieces of furniture, the first thing we need to know is we need to make sure that the stand has got support through to the ground, because sometimes you can go and look at these units and they can have support, but then the actual legs are here. If you see that, you cannot use that for an aquarium, because the support has to go to the floor. Otherwise, if your legs are here, eventually it'll bow and eventually it'll all go bad. Now the other thing too is with these units too, is the strength down isn't too bad. but left and right is not too good because the timber on the back is not heat strong. So you wouldn't want to be pulling it or doing anything silly, which is unlikely to happen anyway. So using proper aquarium furniture is obviously ideal. The other thing with these sorts of ones is a lot of them are not very water resistant. So just be aware that having the aquarium on foreign furniture can also mean the destruction of the actual furniture. So I'm not foreseeing any actual problems here, but it's definitely something to be aware of because these sorts of units, if they do get wet, bloat, and do tend to be destroyed. So just keep an eye on that.